Joining me today is New Hampshire State Senator David Pierce. So, David, you're not going to deal with this issue next year because this is your last year.
Right.
But in the next legislative session, which is the first of the biennium, the New Hampshire budget, two-year budget, comes in. Mm-hmm. It is the 800-pound gorilla in that session.
Every 2 years.
Every 2 years.
Every 2 years.
I know other work gets done, but it really is that. We've got a lot of expense issues that I think we have to deal with as a state. And, my first question is, it'll be two parts. The next will be, how do we pay for it? But the first question is, are there areas where you believe there's too much revenue too much of the state's funds being spent? Or are there areas that are too little that you want to sort of highlight that we as citizens thinking about who we're going to elect ought to sort of focus on?
Right. I think asking the question, are there areas we're spending too much money on in New Hampshire, is an interesting one. But let's get to the realistic one.
Okay, so I wanted your opinion.
I appreciate that.
I have some guests would say that there are a lot of areas that were too much, and
I'm sure
I want to be reasonably neutral with this.
I appreciate that. I think there is a philosophical difference because I believe that it is much more prudent to invest $1 today to solve a problem, to address an issue, rather than kicking the can down the road and spending $10 tomorrow. And there are some people that, for some reason, think that saving $1 today to spend $10 tomorrow, I-93 is a prime example of that. I just don't subscribe to that. But let's talk about the issues that do need some extra attention. And I think the two principal issues in the state are education and transportation and infrastructure. That sounded like three, but I coupled transportation and infrastructure.
Yes. I think they're interconnected.
Yes. Education. There's a lawsuit that's been filed by the Dover School District that is complaining that it's not receiving its adequate funds for funding an adequate education. And the court ruling is expected sometime this month. And we've heard rumors that the legislature may have to be called back into session again in order to fund that, because if there's a settlement, then the money has to be allocated for that, or if there's a judgment, when the legislature last dealt with this, and I think this was 6 or 8 years ago, or maybe 10. Time flies as I look from a different vantage point. The legislature worked very hard, right,
to say an adequate education was, for most districts, a small fraction of their per pupil costs.
Correct. And that was the first year. That was my first year in the legislature, 2007. The legislature had kicked that question down the road, despite the intervention of the state Supreme Court. And in 2007, the legislature bit the bullet, defined what an adequate education was, defined standards for accountability, and how to fund it as well. And but you're right that defining it is really how you define an adequate education is really how you can manipulate what that per pupil spending is.
And the Dover district must be pushing back on that.
Yes, and a lot of school districts are pushing back on that.
And I don't know what offhand, and I don't know what's the number that the state sort of says is adequate.
My best recollection, it's around $3,500.
I was going to say $4,000 comes to mind.
Yeah.
And I know the districts in our coverage area are spending significantly greater than $4,000 per student.
Of course. That's why we have one of the highest property tax rates in the country, is because going to education.
If that rate goes up, is the solution more property taxes?
And that's why I'm identifying that as a significant issue that we need to look at, because early education, I think universal kindergarten should be fully funded. I think full day kindergarten should be funded, and I think we need to look at pre-kindergarten, because all the evidence shows that the earlier you can get to a child, the better chance for success they have in life.
Well, I think the neuroscience shows that the brain is elastic at that age, and
Exactly.
you can do things.
Exactly.
Just from the fundamental perspective.
Right. And I think we need to build a culture in this state that that someone can grow up in New Hampshire and stay in New Hampshire.
And I got to stop you here.
Okay.
We're out of time. We're going to continue our conversation focusing on education and staying in New Hampshire. So please stay with us.